All the substances of abuse, whether they're opiates or cocaine or anything else, they're actually painkillers. Some of them specifically are painkillers. But physical pain and emotional pain, the suffering is experienced in the same part of the brain. So when people suffer emotional rejection, the same part of the brain will light up as if you stuck them with a knife. The Eckhart Tolle says very nicely that addictions begin with pain and end with pain. So that all the addictions are attempts to soothe the pain. So when I work with addictions, the first question is always not why the addiction, but why the pain. And what you find is emotional loss or trauma. In the case of the severe addicts, as in the downtown East Sider, they were every single one of them traumatized. There's no women walking the streets here who had not been sexually abused, not even by accident. But you know, whether it's a sex addiction or internet or relationship or shopping or work addiction, these are all attempts to get away from distress. Keith Richards, the Rolling Stone guitarist, said, who used to have a severe heroin habit, as you know, he said that all the contortions we go through just not to be ourselves for a few hours. Or why would somebody not want to be themselves? Because they're in too much distress and too much pain. So I don't care what they tell you about genetics or any of that choices or any of that nonsense. It's always about pain. Well, the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, it's got a wonderful line in it. Whatever you do, don't try and escape from your pain, but be with it. Because the attempt to escape from pain is what creates more pain. And that's the reality with addiction. But the question is, how can people be with their pain? Well, only if they sense some compassion from somebody. So as another teacher says, only when compassion is present will people allow themselves to see the truth. So addicted people need a compassionate present which will permit them to experience their pain without having to run away from it. And all the attempts to run away, it's like another teacher says, the surest way to go to hell is to try to run away from hell. So you got to be with that pain. You just have to be with it, but you have to have some support. And we live in a society that, one way or the other, is always about instant relief, quick satisfaction, distraction. In other words, we live in a culture that is based on, both economically and psychologically, on not supporting people to be with themselves. So it's always the quick getaway. So it's very difficult to deal with addictions in a society. But yeah, it is a matter of, at some point, finding a way of being with your pain so that you can actually get to know what it's really all about.
Wake up, get dressed, drink coffee, rush breakfast, travel to work in hot, overcrowded conditions, arrive early to impress the boss, read emails, reply, meetings overran, work through lunch, crisis, must stay late to deal with crisis, tired and unproductive, fill up on caffeine, poor quality microwave dinner, finally leaving. Dark and cold outside, no one around, arrive home late, always on call, mobile device. Drink to relax. Sleep while you can sleep. Repeat.
Now that probably sounds very familiar to most of you, but let's start this theory with a sector that most people don't feel much sympathy for, the banking industry. There's been a spate of suicides recently in the City of London. A JP Morgan employee, a vice president in CIB technology at the bank's European HQ in Canary Wharf, leapt to his death from the roof recently. Then there was a former executive of Deutsche Bank who's believed to have hung himself at home in central London earlier this week. And it's not just employees. After the death of an intern working at the Bank of America Merrill Lynch in London, there were accusations of slavery in the city. The 21-year-old was found dead in the showers of his student accommodation after working 21 hours a day for 3 days straight. Other interns said that they worked extremely long hours, relying on caffeine to keep them going because they're competing for ultra-competitive jobs that pay well. There's a process that banking interns know as the magic roundabout, which sounds lovely, but it's not. It's either this place in Swindon Or it's where an intern takes a taxi home, makes it wait outside while they have a shower, and then heads straight back into work. So what though, right? Bankers get paid a hell of a lot of money. The least they can do is long hours. Well, yeah, but whether or not you're a doctor, a nurse, a lawyer, a farmer, a teacher, a cleaner, a journalist, this probably affects you too. The mental health charity Mind estimates that 1 in 6 people in the UK suffers from work-related anxiety, depression or stress. And it's something that affects people all over the world, in all industries. A study by Technologia found that in France, which does have a reputation for going on strike and having things very easy in terms of working hours, found that 1 in 4 farmers and 1 in 5 company bosses are overworking and risk burning themselves out. First world problems? Maybe you could argue that a bit of stress is an acceptable trade-off for some of life's luxuries and not having to struggle to survive day to day. But what about this? In the EU, 56% of people report working at very high speeds. 60% say they work to tight deadlines, 40% say they do monotonous tasks, 15% get regular headaches, 33% get backaches, 23% get fatigue, and the same amount report neck and shoulder pains. But what about the long-term effects? Studies by the British Medical Journal have shown evidence for the biological plausibility of a link between psychosocial stresses from everyday life and heart disease. And they even show that the risk of cardiovascular mortality can be doubled. Add to that the risk of strokes, musculoskeletal and gastrointestinal disease, anxiety and depression. There's a few things that cause it: high demands, low security, lack of opportunity, and if you're unfortunate enough to be one of my colleagues, having to work alongside a complete and utter tool. So if overworking causes such a huge range of physical and mental illnesses, why the hell do so many of us put up with it? A Harvard Business School study in 2008 found that nearly half of all professionals work over 65 hours a week. And we do it because we're scared, because our bosses seem to put so much emphasis on time spent at a desk, time spent at your station, rather than the quality of what you're doing. It doesn't seem to matter that shorter working stints are actually more productive. What matters is your time. And we follow it dutifully. We sit at our posts knowing that we'd be happier not to be there at all because we don't want to be the one who leaves early, leaving a colleague to stay late and appear more conscientious. That gets even worse in a recession or a financial crisis like the one that we've had for the last few years. If you're constantly being reminded how difficult getting a job is and how lucky you are to have one, if you're watching people losing theirs and struggling to get a new one, the slavish grind gets worse and worse. And now you've got technology that means that you're connected 24/7, only an email away, always. Now, psychology today has a theory that we've all bought into a definition of success that is obsessed with money and power, that we've allowed consumerism and wealth generation to become our masters instead of mastering them. Most futurologists have told us that technology will eventually lead to less work and more leisure, that automation will allow us more time to kick back and relax. But so far the opposite seems to be true. Jobs have been made redundant by machines, like in the steel industry, for example, where production levels have been maintained without the manpower. But the result hasn't been more leisure time, it's been being forced to take work that's insecure, unskilled, badly paid, or being unable to find a job at all, and being demonized as some sort of work-shy sponger. Just recently, the Google CEO, Eric Schmidt, warned everyone that technology will make a lot of jobs obsolete in the next few decades. But how about this? Instead of seeing it as a warning, we celebrate it, embrace the fact that we're going to have more leisure time and change the way that we think about work. It's just an idea. I'd love to know whether or not you agree or disagree. Let us know in the comments. Goodbye.
Understand that you are a participant in that because you are allowing those hooks into your flesh. I've said it many times, and I said it recently, said it last year, you must distinguish the difference between saying, have I been sold a lie? And the difference between, yeah, but have I bought a lie? Because there's all the difference in the world attitudinally between those two statements. You are being sold a lie. But that's the perfect right of that salesman to sell you a lie. The universal force doesn't care about that. Universal force's judgment, field is not really operating on that frequency at all. The judgment field, the whole spiritual ball of wax begins based on whether or not you bought that lie. That's the clause, that's the nuance, that's the difference. It's a no different a rule than anything that applies when you're shopping downtown. I can't even think of how it would be different. This person prefers Gucci over, Versace. This person likes the Levi's over Wrangler. They have the right to sell you whatever they feel like. They have the right to even believe what they feel like. Somebody likes cappuccino, somebody else likes latte, mocha, right? Choice must be there. The decision is yours. But where the real moral component comes in is what you bought and what you put your energy into and what you gave in exchange for what you bought. And if man is not in inner harmony or tuned correctly, he's going to create chaotic noise. If a guitar isn't tuned properly, don't expect it to play well. It's going to be in discord and it will create chaotic sounds. So the bottom line comes in, but how are you tuned? How are you tuning your inner instrument, your consciousness? As I said, the alternative to that is to not tune it, but then hang out with a whole symphony of likewise untuned people. So you can all believe you're cool. In fact, you can say, no, this is a radical new form of avant-garde music we're playing here. It's real hip, it's real cool. All this chaos. In fact, this chaos is really true. This chaos is the ultimate form of music. But that's just you mind controlling yourself into believing that your chaos is order. And unfortunately, there are very toxic people in the world who don't like order. They want chaos because they feel good in that chaos, and you're providing it for them. No human being who is in their center can be hypnotized. That's what needs to be remembered. No human being who is in their center, who is being guided, who is close to their intuition, who's a sharp critical apparatus, who's got a sharp sense of judgment, can ever be manipulated. Not for any permanent or lasting length of time. They can be diluted temporarily perhaps, but it's like a muscle you have to keep on working on, a muscle you have to keep on sharpening, like anything. And I really believe that a lot of the obstacles and challenges and tragedies that are occurring in the world, that's what this is for. This is the grinder. This is the thing that's sharpening the blades of intelligent people. You have to have friction. I'm sorry, it just happens. You can't sharpen an axe or a beautiful blade without that grinder, without that sharpening apparatus and the friction that's caused and the mechanics of that. So it's the same way with sharpening consciousness. You must have this whetstone of the world in order to sharpen your mind and sharpen your consciousness, so that you come to see some of the meaning in all of this. And it's ultimately a discovery of your own self. It's not about a discovery of society or other people. All of it is a discovery of who and what you are, ultimately.
Our unhappy, addicted, ego-driven condition has become not simply the source of our own unhappiness. That was bad enough. But now it's the source of great discomfort and dislocation for all life and human society on the planet. We are out of control. We are basically severely addicted to things and cannot stop ourselves. And we know, or we should know, that there is not enough petroleum, heavy metal, so forth and so on in the planet to give all the thing addicts all the things that we know they must have in order to be happy. We have spread this intellectual virus from pole to pole, to Turkmenistan and Borneo, to the upper Amazon and to the Tajiks. What are we going to do about this? Well, so far, we've been treating it like an endless garden party. There's no serious plan on the table to deal with this at all. Culture is a shabby lie, or at least this culture is a shabby lie. I mean, if you work like a dog, you get 260 channels of bad television and a German automobile. You know, what kind of perfection is that? We have our secular society, religion is completely devalued, and consumer object fetishism is the only kind of worth that we collectively recognize. I'm sure you've all seen the t-shirt that says, he, notice he, who dies with the most toys wins. That is in fact the banner under which we're flying here. And the level of unhappiness is immense. I mean, the level of unhappiness among the poor, they've always been miserable. But we've managed to create something entirely new in human history, an utterly miserable ruling class. I mean, there seems no excuse for that. Where is life carrying us? What is this all about? Is it carrying us toward extinction so that the rest of nature can heave an enormous sigh of relief and then get back to the business of nest building, mating flights, and oviposturing and whatever it is that they're doing out there? Or is it carrying us toward some kind of a transition?
No one of us, I think, can imagine that history could go on for another 1,000 years. I mean, what would it look like at the current rate of population growth, spread of epidemic disease, rate of invention, connectivity, depletion of resources, the atmosphere? It is impossible to conceive of another 1,000 years of human history. History then is ending. History is a kind of gestation process. It's a kind of metamorphosis. It's an episode in the life of a species. If you think of the simple example of metamorphosis, that of caterpillar to butterfly, we all know that there is this intermediate resting stage where the caterpillar is, for all practical purposes, enzymatically dissolved and then reconstituted as an entirely different kind of organism with different physical structures, different eyes, different legs, a different way of breathing, with wings where no wings were before, with a different kind of feeding apparatus. This is what's happening to us. History is a process of metamorphosis. It's a pupation stage. It begins with naked monkeys, and it ends with a human-machine, planet-girdling interface capable of releasing the energies that light the stars. And it lasts about 15 or 20,000 years, and during that period, the entire process hangs in the balance. It's a period of high risk. It's like what a butterfly is doing in a cocoon, or what is happening to a child in the womb. It's a gestation process where one form of life is being changed into another.
What the psychedelic experience does, really, is it stretches the envelope of the imaginable. I mean, what can be imagined can be created. What cannot be imagined is not part of the play. But the psychedelics dissolve that boundary as well. And so they promote a larger sense of the world than the values of capitalism, competitiveness, object fetishism, property acquisition, and the bottom line in power. When I say psychedelic, I have something very specific in mind that a substance or a plant should do. It should not inhibit clarity. In other words, not episodes of forgetfulness, lack of memory, passing out, or confusion. It shouldn't interfere with that, and it should transform thought. And it should be accompanied by visual hallucinations with eyes closed. They dissolve boundaries within the psyche, between the conscious and unconscious mind. They dissolve the boundaries that separate people. They dissolve boundaries of time and space. Most people profit from boundary dissolution. It introduces them to the wider horizon of reality. But there are among us people for whom the maintenance of boundaries is a daily struggle. They are trying to create an ego, trying to create a coherent view of the world. These are certainly not candidates for the psychedelic experience. My concern is that the fearful among us have set the social agenda for all of us. And so we are all told this is somehow corrosive of social values, somehow compromising of sanity. The psychedelic experience is the most intense experience a human being can have this side of the yawning grave. The boundary dissolving capacity of these psychedelic substances act, as it were, like a reset button. We are not ultimately the creatures of our culture. Ultimately, we are biologically defined. And what the psychedelics do, I think, is just inject an enormous amount of distance between ourselves and our learned cultural values. The ultimate boundary dissolution is the dissolution of ego. I mean, we hope, we straight people hope, that they never meet it except at death. Of course, they don't realize going to sleep at night is a kind of ego dissolution. But the government is expressive of this dominator culture that we're living in. The ego is a very recent invention, and its hold on reality is very tenuous. And consequently, it walks around imbued with fear. I mean, it feels itself to be a mouse in a world of dinosaurs. That's because it's a very recent development. History is some kind of a phase transition. It only lasts about 25,000 years. Some people think that's a long time. Some people think it's a short time. It depends on where you stand. I think of it as snap. You know, one moment you're hunting ungulates on the plains of Africa, and the next moment you're hurling a gold ytterbium superconducting extrastellar device toward Alpha Centauri with all of mankind aboard in virtual space being run as a simulation in circuitry. You know? It's just first one thing, then the other thing. But now history, which lasts 25,000 years, is this weird period where you're neither fish nor fowl. You know, you're not the hunting ape anymore, but you are not yet the 16-dimensional digital god, you know? And in that transition phase, there is confusion, there is angst. But now we're at the end. We have no, I maintain anybody who's peddling angst and peddling pessimism and peddling all this stuff is just, that's so 2 minutes ago.
I think the most amazing observation that I've made in my lab is this idea that stress could actually change the way you deposit fat on your body. To me, that was a bizarre idea that you could actually alter the way fat is distributed.
Sapolsky, Shively, and others think stress could be a critical factor in the global obesity epidemic. Even worse, fat brought on by stress is dangerous fat.
You know that fat carried on the trunk or actually inside the abdomen is much worse for you than fat carried elsewhere on the body. It behaves differently. It produces different kinds of hormones and chemicals and has different effects on your health. Whatever it is that works for an individual, they need to value stress reduction. I think the problem in our society is that we don't value stress reduction. We, in fact, value the opposite. We admire the person who not only multitasks and does 2 things at once, but does 5 things at once. We kind of admire that person. How do they manage that, you know? Well, that's incredibly stressful way to live. We have to change our values and value people who understand a balanced and serene life.
One heartbreaking moment in history reveals that stress may, in fact, damage us long before we are even aware. Holland, late 1944. A brutal winter and a merciless army of occupation conspire to starve a nation. It is known as the Dutch Hunger Winter. For those who survive today, these are haunting memories.
Ik had niks. Ik kon hem niet zelf voeden meer. Het leek wel of ik de tering had, zo ziek was ik. En dan moet je voor zo'n kind gaan zorgen. Vond ik heel erg. Dat heb ik gedaan op de Dam, naast het paleis. En ik heb gevraagd aan de kosteres: wilt u zo lang als de oorlog duurt mijn kindje grootbrengen? Want ik kan het niet.
Dutch researcher Tessa Roseboom had heard many of those tragic memories. She and her team wanted to know if there were any lingering effects. Roseboom knew that our bodies respond to famine in much the same way they respond to other stressors. So she set out to see if the fetuses of women pregnant during these arduous days could possibly be affected by stress. Because of meticulous record-keeping by the Dutch, Roseboom was able to identify over 2,400 people who could have been impacted. She and her team analyzed the data from those born during and after the famine and came to a surprising conclusion.
I think that you could say that these babies were exposed to stress in fetal life, and they're still suffering the consequences of that now, 60 years later.
Many of the Dutch Hunger Winter children live today, all in their 60s. Many still bear the scars of war.
We found that babies who were conceived during the famine have an increased risk of cardiovascular disease. They have more hypercholesterolemia. They are more responsive to stress. And they generally are in poorer health than people who were born before the famine or conceived after it. Researchers think that stress hormones in a mother's blood triggered a change in the nervous system of the fetus as it struggled with starvation. This was the fetus's first encounter with stress. 6 decades later, the bodies of these Dutch Hunger Winter children still haven't forgotten.
What we now know is it's not just your fat cell storage that winds up being vulnerable to events like this. It's your brain chemistry. It's your capacity to learn as an adult. It's your capacity to respond to stress adaptively rather than maladaptively. How readily you fall into depression, how vulnerable you are to psychiatric disorders. Yet another realm in which early experience and early stress can leave a very bad footprint.
If I had had an option, I would not have opted to be bipolar. But now that I am bipolar, I'll have to live with it.
Dus dan heb je dat gevoel van als je wat soepeler leeft, dat je dat niet hebt. Ik kan het niet echt zeggen. Ik ben wel gauw boos.
What the Dutch hunger winter phenomenon is about is experience environment starts long before birth, and adverse, stressful environments can leave imprints, can leave scars lasting a whole lifetime.
We're just taking fingerprints because no baboon has the same fingerprint as another one. So we just took coney bears, and I'm hoping to go over to Riff and get his.
During this year's multi-generational research, Robert, who has spent his career documenting stress's effects on the individual and on the cell, tracks the trail of stress even deeper into our bodies.
One of the most interesting new directions of stress research is taking the effects of stress down to a nuts and bolts level of how cells work, how genes work, that half a dozen years ago nobody could have imagined.
The once unimaginable, genetic structures called telomeres, which protect the ends of our chromosomes from fraying. As we age, our telomeres shorten.
What's interesting is stress, by way of stress hormones, can accelerate the shortening of telomeres. So the assumption is for the exact same aged guys, if you're a low-ranking guy who's just marinating in stress hormones, your telomeres are going to be shorter.
So how does this formidable finding apply to us?
Enter Insight. This is the first and only safe injection site in North America. Inside these doors, users are no longer punishable by drug laws. They inject their drugs with the help of government-funded medical staff. This place serves over 600 addicts a day. Cameras are prohibited here, so we went undercover. Okay, no turning back now. I know that I should have been scared, but I actually felt safe here. Now I'm starting to get scared. You know, I was hoping she would break the needle or the cops would come in and shut the place down, but none of that happened. Instead, she just gave me the needle, and I was on my way.
supervised injection site may be the first time that the drug addict comes into contact with healthcare workers who are not judging him and are hostile to him and are trying to change him. That non-judgmental contact gives people an opportunity to consider addiction in a new light. And so harm reduction is not only about specific techniques, it's also about meeting people where they are.
How you feeling, man?
To be honest, out of it. But I'm cogent. I'm not having difficulty speaking. But I do feel like I'm floating on that cloud. It's actually pretty awesome. Yeah. But it's not as intense as I would have thought. Like, I'm still Misha Kleider, and I'm not. I figured it would make you insane or something. Okay, come roll over. I want to take you on a magical journey because I know a lot of you are never going to have this experience. I don't expect a lot of my viewing audience to do heroin. If I can express this at all well, it's like cruising on a cloud. My legs hurt. Typically, my legs don't hurt right now. I have a lower back problem that has cleared right up. As soon as, like before the needle left my arm, I could feel the pain in my lower back disappear, like completely. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful experience, actually. I feel dizzy. I feel like I need to puke or something.
Mish, come on, let's go for a walk. Dude, seriously? I don't know why you did that.
It's made me dizzy looking at you. I feel like there's like little baby ants popping with their fucking eggs underneath my fucking beard or something. Okay, I don't know if I got bullshit stuff or what, Al, but honestly, I'm not feeling any like real cool sensation right now. Like past like the first 10 minutes, that was nice, but now I'm just feeling like my skin's all fucking itchy. I feel like there's little like ant baby fucking hatchlings under my fucking skin, especially on my arm right here where that fucking needle went in. Honestly, you can do whatever the fuck you want, but I'm going home because I'm done with this shit. Keep playing it, whatever, you can follow me home, but I'm going home. I'm not living out on the street any longer. What?
Seriously. Let's do this. 5 more days, you can do it. Let's go back to the side.
First of all, you can't tell me I have to do it. You can't fucking tell me that because you're not the one doing this. I'm the one who's doing this, right? I'm the one that has to do all this fucking bullshit, and it's actually annoying. You keep on saying, you know, all this crap to me. I'm fucked in the head right now. I can't even talk straight, but I'm going home. I'm done.
Hey. Wait up. Come on.
What?
5 more days.
We're not doing this, Al. I know what 5 more days is gonna do. But look, retard, shut up for a second. Hey, shut up. Hey, let me speak for a second, okay? What's 5 more days gonna do? What's 5 more days gonna do? I fucking did the street stint. I'm fucking done. I'm fucking done this shit. Fuck you. You didn't have to fucking do this, okay? You observed this shit. I fucking did it, so fuck you. Fuck you.
You still want to do this? Mish, are you sure you want to quit?
Does it look like I want to quit? The answer is yes, Alex.
Alright.
Fuck it.
Dude, let me see your eyes. Mish, are you sure you want to do this, man? Last call, bro.
I know.
Come on.
Exactly. Last call. Good night.
I passed out as soon as my head hit the pillow. I then had the worst sleep of my entire life. I had cold sweats, I was short of breath, and I actually looked forward to vomiting, because it woke me from the nightmares of the last month. Then, the sun hit my face, and the bad dream was over.
Well, the project's failed. Right? I don't know. Can we salvage this? What happened?
So has your opinion changed about the homeless?
Yeah. Well, the problem is just so much more complicated than I initially thought. And I just wrote them off as scammers before for the most part, and they're not scammers. These are people that are panhandling and stuff like that. Like, there's some issue they have with them.
If you could boil it all down to just one thing, one issue, what would it be?
Addiction. Addiction is definitely the common thread that unites that whole scene. You know, for everybody I met. You know, I didn't meet anyone that wasn't addicted to something. Yeah. Not a single person, when I think about it, actually, that I met down there was addiction free.
The global approach to trying to deal with drugs is headed up by the United Nations Office on Drug Policy and the International Narcotics Control Board. Their goal was to one day create a drug-free world, and I think that's a fantasy. I think it really illustrates just the magnitude of the problem with addiction, that it's really the plague of our time.
In a capitalist society, in a liberal society, we accept that this is not a solvable problem, but there'll always be people that are like leaves in the wind of social pressure. They'll go the path of least resistance. And if that path is getting high today and the devil take care of tomorrow, they'll close their eyes and blindly go into that trap.
Given that we live in a culture is addicted, as everybody says, to oil, where we engage in the pursuit of the amenities and luxuries provided by oil, despite the fact that we're destroying the earth, who are we to tell the addict that they shouldn't be engaging in self-destructive behaviors? In other words, it's a scapegoating. We're deeply related to the addict, we just don't want to see the relationship, so we ostracize him and banish him to the social periphery.
So, the experiment is complete, and what did I find? Life on the street is easy when you're healthy, clean, and living off all the free services. But the street catches up with you, and when you're sick and on drugs, it's a nightmare. The only difference is that I was able to wake up from it. I'm left wondering, is there any hope? One man seems to think so. During the completion of this film, Vancouver voted in a new young mayor. This is Gregor Robertson, and this is the best day of his life.
We started this campaign by talking about homelessness, and tonight I'm going to finish right where I started. We are going to end homelessness in Vancouver.
Like you, I have one simple question. How?
The most economical way to do this and the most just way to do this is to focus on housing and healthcare supports attached to that housing. It'll be more affordable and it'll be better life for thousands of people in Vancouver.
I lived on the streets for almost a month. I tried the hardest drugs out there, crack, heroin. One thing that became very clear was that addiction is a major cause of homelessness. So if you're gonna solve homelessness, you need to solve addiction.
The addiction challenge is very difficult for us. It's a tough one to break. And we're seeing some success now with the shelters and basically saying it's okay, you can come in if you're still using. You can use these shelters to at least get a good meal and get 8 hours of sleep.
But 95% of addiction treatments fail. And what's going to happen when you provide all these homeless addicts with free housing? Instead of dying from their addiction on the street, they're going to die from addiction in the free homes that you're giving them. But they're still going to die. That seems like a Band-Aid and not a solution.
Well, it's a Band-Aid, but if people are literally dying on the streets, you gotta look at what pieces you can support them on. I mean, if you don't come in with a whole complement of support, then where's the hope? Until you work upstream, until we're working with people and making sure they don't go into that dead end of addiction, it's going to be damage control.
Yeah. Do you honestly think that you can end homelessness?
When I say end homelessness, or that we do a lot better on addictions and for treatment, there's just so much more that can be done. And can we ever get all the way there and into utopia? Let's be realistic. It's not going to be like that. We've got to have shelters and housing options that are permissive and that take people from where they are and meet them where they're at.
Good luck. Do I believe you will succeed? I wish I could. But the fact is, in the heart of my perfect city exists a 10-block hell of drugs, death, disease, and destitution. Despite billions spent on services for the homeless, they have not slowed the plague of addiction. It is this self-imposed slavery that perpetuates homelessness. And it's a slavery that no government, no doctor, and no bed will ever end. Only they themselves can do it. Most die before they get the chance. So,
if you come here, if you come here,
and get addicted, you stay here.
You stay here.
You do stay here.
These
are the streets of plenty.
The Kikarok Troop is the one I started with 30 years ago. And they were your basic old baboon troop at the time, and which means males were aggressive and society was highly stratified and females took a lot of grief, and your basic off-the-rack baboon troop. And then by now, almost 20 years ago, something horrific and scientifically very interesting happened to that troop.
The Kikarok troop took to foraging for food in the garbage dump of a popular tourist lodge. It was a fatal move. The trash included meat tainted with tuberculosis. The result was that nearly half the males in the troop died.
Not unreasonably, I got depressed as hell and pretty damn angry about what happened. You know, you're 30 years old, you can afford to expend a lot of emotion on a baboon troop, and there was a lot of emotion there.
For Robert, a decade of research appeared to have been lost. But then he made a curious observation about who had died and who had survived.
It wasn't random who died. In that troop, if you were aggressive, and if you were not particularly socially connected, socially affiliative, you didn't spend your time grooming and hanging out, if you were that kind of male, you died.
Every alpha male was gone. The Kikarok troop had been transformed.
And what you were left with was twice as many females as males, and the males who were remaining were, just to use scientific jargon, they were good guys. They were not aggressive jerks. They were nice to the females. They were very socially affiliative. It completely transformed the atmosphere of the troop.
When male baboons reach adolescence, they typically leave their home troop and roam, eventually finding a new troop.
And when new adolescent males would join the troop, they'd come in just as jerky as any adolescent males elsewhere on this planet, and it would take them about 6 months to learn, we're not like that in this troop. We don't do stuff like that. We're not that aggressive. We spend more time grooming each other. Males are calmer with each other. You do not dump on a female if you're in a bad mood. And it takes these new guys about 6 months, and they assimilate this style. And you have baboon culture, and this particular troop has a culture of very low levels of aggression and high levels of social affiliation, and they're doing that 20 years later.
And so the tragedy had provided Robert with a fundamental lesson, not just about cells, but how the absence of stress could impact society.
Do these guys have the same problems with high blood pressure? Nope. Do these guys have the same problems with brain chemistry related to anxiety, stress hormone levels? Not at all. It's not just your rank, it's what your rank means in your society.
And the same is true for humans, with only a slight variation.
We belong to multiple hierarchies, and you may have the worst job in your corporation and no autonomy and control and predictability, but you're the captain of the company softball team that year. And you better bet you are going to have all sorts of psychological means to decide it's just a job, 9 to 5. That's not what the world is about. What the world's about is softball. I'm the head of my team. People look up to me. And you come out of that deciding you are on top of the hierarchy that matters to you. Well, that worked. And lots of baboon poop. Which, under the right circumstances with the right season's experiment, is a gold mine. Unfortunately, this time around, it's just a cage to have to clean now. I'm studying stress for 30 years now, and I even tell people how they should live differently. So presumably I should have incorporated all of this, and the reality is, like, I'm unbelievably stressed and type A and poorly coping, and like, why else would I study this stuff 80 hours a week? No doubt everything I advise is going to lose all its credibility if I keel over dead from a heart attack in my early 50s. Nah, I'm not good at dealing with stress. You know, one thing that works to my advantage is I love my work and I love every aspect of it, so that's good. But nonetheless, this is pretty clearly a different place than the savannah in East Africa. You know, you can do science here that's very different and more interesting in some ways. You can have hot showers on a more regular basis. It's a more interesting, varied world in lots of ways, but you know, there's a lot out there that you sure miss. It is a pretty miraculous place where every meal tastes good and you're 10 times more aware of every sensation. This is a hard place to come to year after year without getting, I think, a very different metabolism and temperament. I'm more extroverted here, I'm more happy. It's a hard place not to be happy.
So one antidote to stress may be finding a place where we have control. But how do we reckon with all the time we spend at work?
I would say what we've learned from the Whitehall study, from the study of the non-human primates, is the conditions in which people live and work are absolutely vital for their health.
Senior civil servant Sarah Woodhall enjoys the benefits of control.
I don't think I suffer from stress. I don't work 100 hours a week. I control the amount of work that I do to make sure that I can continue to deliver long term.
Control, the amount of control, is intimately related to where you are in the occupational hierarchy. And what we have found is, in general, where people report to us that things have got worse, that the amount of work stress has gone up, their illness rates go up. Where people report to us that they've got more control, they're being treated more fairly at work, there's more justice in the amount of treatment, so things are getting better, the amount of illness goes down.
I've been very lucky. I haven't ever experienced any problems with my health.
But not everyone is so lucky. So is there a prescription for the vast majority of us who aren't at the top?
Give people more involvement in the work, give them more say in what they're doing, give them more reward for the amount of effort they put out, and it might well be you'll have not just a healthier workplace, but a more productive workplace as well.
I've managed to achieve a degree of control. At the moment, I'm in a really good position. This is the first time where I feel I've had a boss who appreciates me. He doesn't dominate team meetings, he sits back. He invites people to contribute. He lets other people chair. He's a real manager. And he, from the start, when I returned after my latest sick leave just 6 months ago, he was so positive. I think I feel sufficiently empowered.
Who would have imagined that Robert's baboons would point us humans towards a stress-free utopia?
This may sound a little fanciful, but I think what we're trying to create is a better society. The implications, both of the baboons and of the British civil servants, is how can we create a society that has the conditions that allow people to flourish? And that's where this is heading, to create a better society that promotes human flourishing.
So what do baboons teach the average person in there? Don't bite somebody because you're having a bad day. Don't displace on them in any sort of manner. Social affiliation is a remarkably powerful thing, and that's said by somebody who lives in a world where ambition and drive and type A-ness and all of that sort of thing dominates. Those things are real important, and one of the greatest forms of sociality is giving rather than receiving, and all of those things make for a better world. Another one of the things that baboons teach us is if they're able to, in one generation, transform what are supposed to be textbook social systems sort of engraved in stone, we don't have an excuse when we say there's certain inevitabilities about human social systems.
And so, the haunting question that endures from Robert's life work: are we brave enough to learn from a baboon? The Kikarak troop didn't just survive without stress, they thrived. Can we?